For as long as I can remember, I have always loved all things spooky. It seems like all my favorite childhood movies and shows dealt with monsters or ghosts, and Scooby-Doo was no different. It was a harmless, fun show about a group of teens riding around solving mysteries and unmasking monsters. The one I most remember watching as a kid though was a pup named Scooby-Doo, which took the characters and depicted them as younger versions of themselves.
He's trying to freeze the crew. He's not a nice man. His touch will turn you blue.
But I never realized just how many iterations had already existed by the time I was watching it on TV. I'd always assumed there was Scooby-Doo, the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, and a pup named Scooby-Doo. I had completely forgotten about Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo, or the new Scooby-Doo movies, or the Scooby-Doo show. It all just blended together into one thing. Regardless, Scooby-Doo was a big part of my childhood and big reason why I enjoy things that go bump in the night. Although as I got older and my taste started to shift, Scooby-Doo just came off as a little too cheesy. It wasn't something that could really hold my attention anymore. I mean, here I am at 9 years old, watching things like Chud, Alien, Predator, Tremors. How is Mystery Inc. supposed to compete with that? And as I got older, then came things like Friday the 13th and A Nightmare on Elm Street. However, Scooby-Doo would come back on my radar when I saw an advertisement for a new Scooby-Doo direct-to-video movie called Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. The biggest takeaway from the trailer was the improvement in animation and the fact the monsters were actually real.
This time, the monsters are real.
Now, this isn't the first time Mystery Inc. came face to face with real monsters, but it was definitely marketed that way. Now, I can't remember who got the VHS when it came out. Either it was myself or my sister, but when I watched it, I was blown away. They took the classic Scooby-Doo characters and formula and updated it while also still making it feel like classic Scooby-Doo. They didn't bastardize it like a certain Scooby-Doo project that absolutely no one likes. During the early 90s, Scooby-Doo was kind of dead. After A Pup Named Scooby-Doo ended, this series kind of languished. TBS, or the Turner Broadcasting System, would purchase Hanna-Barbera in 1991, and with their brand new cable-centered Cartoon Network, they were in desperate need of new content. And Scooby-Doo would be said content. The original series aired and over time began to attract a large audience, with the show garnering the channel's highest ratings at times. In 1996, Turner and Time Warner would merge, and Davis Doy, who was in charge of the Hanna-Barbera properties, was tasked with creating new programs out of their existing catalog of characters, and so a direct-to-video Scooby-Doo feature was decided. The studio felt this movie would end up being a one-off thing, so they were very hands-off on the entire project, which gave Davis and writer Glenn Leopold more creative freedom to construct the story they wanted to tell. While Davis did help to craft the overall structure of the film, Glenn was given solo writing credit. The story was a mixture of a few ideas from other projects. Part of it came from an unfinished script Glenn had been working on for the cartoon SWAT Cats. There were some ideas taken from an episode of Jonny Quest, and a bit taken from the Pirates of Dark Water. There was also a bit of an argument as to how the movie would play out. Some wanted Mystery Inc. to investigate real monsters because they felt the old, tried-and-true formula worked well for a 20-minute episode, but could get boring for a full-length feature, while others felt they should stick to the roots of the show and have the gang unmask the bad guy at the end. Eventually, both parties would meet somewhere in the middle, incorporating both elements into one movie. The film follows the members of Mystery Inc. as the group has sort of disbanded. Tired of the same old boring man-in-a-costume shtick, they've decided to go their own ways, with Fred and Daphne producing a television series, Velma now running her own bookstore, and Scooby and Shaggy working customs and eating all the contraband food. I don't know if this was intentional, but the whole thing feels very Ghostbusters 2. In the beginning of that film, the Ghostbusters basically don't even exist anymore. Ray runs his own occult bookstore, just like Velma, and Venkman has his own television show. Although Fred and Daphne seem a bit more sincere in what they want to accomplish when compared to Venkman, who's really just there for the money and fame.
Hey, Dr. Venkman!
Yes.
World of the Psychic!
That's right, how you doing?
Daphne and Fred are planning on traveling across the country in the search of real haunted locations for Daphne's new show, when Fred gets the idea of calling in the old gang and surprising Daphne on her birthday.
Well then...
Surprise! Happy birthday, Daphne!
Of the original voice actors, the only one to return would be Frank Welker as Fred. Early on, Frank was worried that he would be replaced, as producers felt his voice had changed over the years. They wanted someone with a higher pitched voice, but Frank insisted they go back and watch the old cartoons because he felt his voice as Fred was nearly the exact same. The issue and reason why there were talks of replacing him was because the executives had gone back and rewatched the episodes on Cartoon Network, which had been sped up to save time and allow for more commercials. This created a higher pitch in all the characters, but when slowed to their normal speed, the execs realized Frank still sounded nearly identical to how he did some 30 years ago. Mary Kay Bergman would replace Heather North as Daphne. At this point, Heather North was all but retired, but she did come in for one day of recording. The execs soon realized they needed a fresher voice for the role, so they quickly brought in someone with a more youthful energy. BJ Ward would take over the role of Velma after playing the character in a crossover with Johnny Bravo. Radio personality Scott Innes came in for Scooby-Doo, as the original voice actor Don Messick passed away just 1 year prior to the film coming out. They even dedicated the movie to him at the very end of the credits. And Casey Kasem, well, he turned down the role of Shaggy after producers failed to give in to some of his crazy demands. And what were those crazy demands? Well, apparently Casey had become a vegetarian and demanded Shaggy do the same, despite years of Shaggy eating anything in sight. The demand went completely against Shaggy's character, and the fact the movie takes place in New Orleans, he was going to be shoveling in some crawfish. Casey even turned down a Burger King ad in 1995 for the same reason. The producers gave Casey one last chance to redub Shaggy's lines, but he wouldn't budge, so voice actor Billy West stepped in and took over. With the gang back together, they all get back to doing what they do best: finding fake monsters. One thing I'll say is they make the monsters look a lot more menacing than they did back in the 60s. It's not just a guy with a sheet over his head, now they look like they're out to lop your head off. In the opening scene of the movie, Fred is even clawed, which isn't something you ever really saw before. With the updated monsters, you also get an updated look to the classic characters. The two most notable updates are Daphne and Fred. Fred has lost his ascot and bell bottoms, and in return has jeans, a button-up shirt, and a khaki vest. Daphne's attire is more of a business look, but they keep the same basic color scheme, although that missing headband almost makes her look like someone else entirely. While suggestions were made to give Shaggy a red shirt and sneakers, they went with a smart idea and kept his look basically the same. Velma too is largely the same, though her sweater is an oranger color and she no longer has knee-high socks. The characters all have their classic look in the opening scene as well, so you can go back and compare. With fake after fake, all Daphne wants is a real haunted house. This is when they meet Luna Dupree, who claims to work in a real haunted house on Moonscar Island.
A pirate named Morgan Moonscar died on the island, and his spirit still haunts the place.
They all decide they're going to said island, but not before Fred can do a little flirting with Lena, which is confusing because I always thought he and Daphne were a thing. And am I the only one who ever looked at what Shaggy and Scooby were eating and thought it looked good? On the way to the haunted mansion, they meet the ferryman Jacques and crusty old snakebite Scruggs, who's dead set on catching an elusive catfish named Big Mona.
I can't stand tourists.
Snakebite is voiced by Mark Hamill, and if it wasn't for the internet, I never would have noticed. Most of Mark's voice work ends up sounding like a variation of his Joker, but here his voice is unrecognizable. When they arrive at the house, Scooby, who as far as I know has never had an issue with other animals, is suddenly not very fond of cats and chases after all the cats on the property. I'm pretty sure Frank Welker does the voice work for the cats as well, because one sounds an awful lot like Slimer from the real Ghostbusters. We're also introduced to a gardener for the property, Bo Neville, who is set up as the possible antagonist, though both Daphne and Velma seem to take a liking to him.
But he is kinda cute. Jinkies!
The owner of the haunted mansion, Simone Lenoir, meets the gang in unceremonious fashion, and she gives them a brief history lesson on her island. It was owned by her family and is a pepper plantation, the show doing its best job to try and skirt around any racial issues, which definitely went over my head as a kid. Simone invites them inside to see her haunted house, so long as Scooby can stay out of trouble. While in the kitchen, because where else would they be, Scooby and Shaggy discover some spooky ghost writing on the wall. When the others come to see what's going on, they discover the ghost of pirate Morgan Moonscar telling them to get out. Velma takes it upon herself to dig further into this ghostly threat and decides to scrape the paint off the wall, revealing it to be part of Moonscar's ship, though I really hope she's repainting that.
What are you doing to my kitchen?
Jinkies! Guess I got carried away.
Some antics between Scooby and Mojo, Snakebite's hunting pig, ends up driving Scooby and Shaggy into a pit and straight into the path of zombie Moonscar, though they manage to escape before Moonscar can feast on their delicious brains. Scooby and Shaggy run into the gardener Bo, and then the others show up, and now Velma is beginning to suspect Bo may be the one behind all of this. He was just newly hired, so how much can he possibly be trusted? Mystery Inc. is invited to stay the night by Simone since the ferry doesn't run at night, and Scooby and Shaggy are confronted by a Civil War ghost telling them to get away. When the others check on their ghost, none can be found. However, when Velma blows some dust off the mirror, she notices it says how to cook humans. Oh wait, wrong cartoon. It says Colonel Jackson T. Pettigrew. Another incident between Scooby and the cats, and Simone kicks him out of the house, but not before Lena prepares them some crawfish. You know, the same fake, hand-drawn crawfish that Casey Kasem refused to reprise his role for. When Scooby and Shaggy need a drink of water after eating the hottest peppers in Louisiana, spooky things begin to happen and the dead begin to rise. Fred and the others hear their screams and head out into the bayou, where they run into Bo, who says they were running around screaming something about zombies. They split up, with Velma going off with Bo so she can keep an eye on him and definitely nothing else. Fred and Daphne find the mystery machine, but with no sign of Scooby or Shaggy, Daphne judo flips a zombie just as it reaches for her. Scooby and Shaggy appear, and they all struggle with removing the zombie's mask, until they realize it isn't a mask at all.
Maybe it's real.
The zombies begin to rise, and when Fred and Daphne hear the shouts of Lena and Simone, they decide to run back to save them. Although they lose the camera and all of their evidence to some quicksand because Fred is a huge klutz. Now, with any Scooby-Doo, you usually have some pop music during the chase sequences, like the classic Scooby-Doo theme, and here it's no different. Earlier in the film, you get an updated version of the Scooby theme by band Third Eye Blind, and when the movie has its little montage of Mystery Inc. solving cases, a song made specifically for the movie called The Ghost Is Here plays, which was written by Glenn Leopold and performed by the band Sky Cycle. Now, those are all well and good. However, the song that plays during this particular chase sequence with the zombies has to be one of the best songs ever made for a children's direct-to-video movie. If you've seen the movie, then you know what I'm talking about. It's terror time again.
And it's terror time again. They've got you running through the night.
Seriously, even closing in on 40 years old, this song still kicks so much ass. They really didn't have to go so hard for a Scooby-Doo movie, but they did, and if you need a song to hit a new PR at the gym, this is the one to go for. Fred and the gang get back to the house and find Lena in a secret passage beneath the stairs. She claims zombies took Miss Simone, so they have to save her. However, Velma notices something odd, and before she can do anything, it's already too late. Miss Simone and Lena were playing them from the beginning, and not just that, but they're cat people. Yeah, so these two have voodoo dolls of everyone, which they use to subdue them, so they can drain their life force at the stroke of midnight, because of some ancient cat god curse. They didn't, however, make dolls of Scooby and Shaggy, so we know those two are definitely not going to do anything to stop this. Although when they find Jacques the ferryman, even he's a werecat. So the zombies are actually the good guys. The werecats have been bringing people here for hundreds of years to drain their life force, and the zombies were those poor unfortunate souls who were just trying to warn them. You can even see the zombies trying to help earlier when one hands Shaggy a vine to help Scooby, so they were already hinting that the zombies were good. The werecats get a hold of Scooby and Shaggy, but before they can fully drain them, Velma gets free and her and Daphne make voodoo dolls of Lena and Simone. They miss their time to feed, and the werecats turn to skeletons and then to dust. And this has to be the most violent Scooby-Doo movie or show ever, or at least up to this point. Has there ever been a death in Scooby-Doo before? It wasn't just the werecats either, but also when Simone talked a bit about their backstory and all the villagers that got eaten by crocodiles. The monsters in this movie really don't mess around. Since the werecats are dead and the zombies have been avenged, they can all now rest in peace. Oh, and Bo the gardener? Well, he was an undercover detective the whole time. Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island is peak Scooby-Doo. I really don't think it gets any better than this. Now, I haven't seen everything Scooby-Doo. In fact, I think this was the last show or movie from the franchise that I ever watched. So there may be other things that are as good as this, but I can't see anything being better. They took the tried and true Scooby-Doo formula and managed to bring it into a more modern setting without making it feel dated. The monsters all looked scary and threatening. I mean, the Gillman knockoff in the beginning looked especially ferocious and like he really wanted to bring harm to Mystery Inc. The zombies look grotesque and the animation all around is top notch. You can tell they put a little bit more money into this production because you're not getting the average direct-to-video animation. The film had a roughly $10 million budget with a very aggressive ad campaign, somewhere in the realm of $50 million. But when all was said and done, the film sold so well that it made around $164 million. The animation doesn't always look amazing though, but when it does, it reminds me of some of the stuff they do in Batman the Animated Series. Oh, and speaking of Batman the Animated Series, Miss Simone was voiced by Adrienne Barbeau, who also did the voice of Catwoman. So she went from voicing a Catwoman to becoming a literal Catwoman. There is a sequel to Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island called Return to Zombie Island. However, from everything I've heard about it, it's a piece of garbage and not worth your time. So I'm not even going to bother. Still, if you're looking for something spooky the whole family can sit down and watch together, or you're looking to relive a piece of your childhood, I really can't recommend this movie enough. But that's me. What do you think of Zombie Island? And if there's any interest in seeing more Scooby-Doo content, maybe on the older stuff, let me know down in the comments. Anyways, that's all for today, folks, but I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.